Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Bhakti Jana Baba Giravapari. Gopi Jana Baba Giravapari. Yashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giravadagari. Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pari Rajakacharya Ashtotara Shaka Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pari Rajakacharya Ashtotara Shaka Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Sachinandana Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jaya Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhata Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Sad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Sathar Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Yamuna Maya Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tosa Devi Ki Jai. Anatakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Gurunath Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. ISKCON Bharma Guru Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Pramananda, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru, Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayan Namaskritya.
Narayana Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devam Saraswatam Vyasam.
Devi Saraswati Vyasam.
Tito Jayam Yuridayat.
Namaste.
Nasta Preshu Abhatreshu.
Namaste.
Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke. Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva the author. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by the rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised for transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Okay, and did you post the class? Okay. All right, so today we're reading Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 23, Maharaj Prithu, Going Back Home, and we'll be doing verses 14 and 15. So I'll read verse 14 and the purport, and then we'll do 15 together. Sampitya payam parshnipyam bayam utsarayan janai nabhyam kostesh bhavastapya Vridyurai Kanta Shirshani. Translation. When Maharaj Prithu practiced a particular yogic sitting posture, he blocked the doors of his anus with his ankles, pressed his right and left calves, and gradually raised his life air upward, passing it on to the circle of his navel, up to his heart and throat, and finally pushed it upwards to the central position between his two eyebrows. Purport. The sitting posture described herein is called Muktasana. In the yoga process, after following the strict regulative principles controlling sleeping, eating, mating, one is allowed to practice the different sitting postures. The ultimate aim of yoga is to enable one to give up this body according to his own free will. One who has attained the ultimate summit of yoga practice can live in the body as long as he likes, or as long as he is not completely perfect. Leave the body, go anywhere within or outside the universe. Some yogis leave their bodies to go to the higher planetary systems and enjoy the material facilities therein. However, intelligent yogis do not wish to waste their time within this material world at all. They do not care for the material facilities in higher planetary systems, but are interested in going directly to the spiritual sky, back home, back to Godhead. From the description in this verse, it appears that Maharaj Prithu has no desire to promote himself to the higher planetary systems. He wanted to return home immediately back to Godhead. Although Maharaj Prithu stopped all practice of mystic yoga, after realizing Krishna consciousness, he took advantage of his previous practice and immediately placed himself on the Brahmagupta platform in order to accelerate his return to Godhead. The aim of this particular system of asana is known as the sitting posture for liberation, or Muktasana. It is to attain success in Kundalini chakra and gradually raise the life from the Muladhara chakra to the Svadhisthana chakra, then to the Manipura chakra, then the Anahata chakra, the Vishuddha chakra, and finally the Ajnana chakra. When the yogi reaches the Ajnana chakra, between the two eyebrows, he is able to penetrate the Brahmarandra, or the hole in his skull, and go to any planet he desires, up to the spiritual kingdom of Vaikuntha, or Krishnaloka. The conclusion is that one has to come to the Brahmagupta stage for going back to Godhead. However, those who are in Krishna consciousness, or who are practicing Bhakti Yoga, Shravanam, Kirtana, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, can return to Godhead without even practicing the Muktasana process. The purpose of Muktasana practice is to come to the Brahmabhuta stage, for without being on the Brahmabhuta stage, one cannot be promoted to the spiritual sky. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mam Chayo Yavichar Yam Mam Chayo Yavicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samitityaitan Brahmabhuya Yakalpate. The Bhakti Yogi practicing Bhakti Yoga is always situated on the Brahmabhuta stage. Brahmabhuya Kalpate. If a devotee is able to continue on the Brahmabhuta platform, he enters the spiritual sky automatically after death and returns to Godhead. Consequently, a devotee need not feel sorry for not having practiced the Kundalini chakra or not penetrating the 6 chakras one after another. As far as Maharaj Prithu was concerned, he had already practiced this process. And since he did not want to wait for the time when his death would occur naturally, he took advantage of the sub-chakra penetration process, and thus gave up the body according to his own free will, and immediately entered the spiritual sky. They were in okay. This one responsibly. Utsarpayam stutam murdni Pramena Veshya Nispriya Vayum Vayu Shitaukam Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat Utsarpayam Stutam Murdni Premena Veshya Nispriya Vayum Vayu Shitaukayam Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat Utsarpayam Stutam Murdni Pramena Veshya Nispriya Vayum Vayu Shitaukayam Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat. Okay, please chant.
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Utsarpayam stutam
murni Ramena Veshya Nispriya Vayum Vayu Chitakayam Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat Utsarpayastum te murni
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Tejas Tejas Yayu
Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Tejas Yayu
Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Utsarpayam stutam murni
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Ramena Veshya Nispriya
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Vayum Vayu Chitakayam
Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat
Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat Utsarpayam stutam murni Ramena Veshya Nispriya Vayum Vayu Chitakayam Tejas Tejas Yayu Yujat.
All right, word for word. Utsarpayam,
Utsarpayam,
thus placing,
thus placing,
chu,
two,
but, tam,
down,
the air,
there,
murdni,
moving
on the head,
on the head,
pramena,
moving
gradually,
gradually,
aveshya,
avesya,
placing,
placing,
nispriya,
nispriya,
being freed from all material desires,
being free from all material desires,
vayum,
mayum,
the air portion of the body,
the air portion of the body,
vaya,
mayam,
the total air covering the universe,
the total air covering the universe,
shitao,
Shitao,
in the total covering of earth,
the total covering the earth,
kayam, this material body, teja,
Veda,
the fire in the body,
fire in the body,
tejasi,
sea,
in the total fire of the material covering,
the total fire in the earth.
ayuyujat,
Ayurveda,
mixed. Translation by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In this way, Prithvi Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. Please repeat. In this way, Prithvi Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. Purport. When the spiritual spark, which is described as 1/10,000th part of the tip of a hair, is forced into material existence, that spark is covered by gross and subtle material elements. The material body is composed of 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. When one attains liberation, he is freed from these material coverings. Indeed, success in yoga involves getting free from these material coverings and entering into spiritual existence. Lord Buddha's teachings of nirvana are based on this principle. Lord Buddha instructed his followers to give up these material coverings by means of meditation and yoga. Lord Buddha did not give any information about the soul, but if one follows his instructions strictly, he will ultimately become free from the material coverings to attain nirvana. When a living entity gives up the material coverings, he remains a spirit soul. This spirit soul must enter into the spiritual sky to merge into Brahman effulgence. Unfortunately, unless the living entity has information of the spiritual world and the Vaikunthas, there is a 99.9% chance of his falling down again into material existence. There is, however, a small chance of being promoted to a spiritual planet from the Brahman effulgence or the Brahmayoti. This Brahmayoti is considered by impersonalists to be without variety, and the Buddhists consider it to be void. In either case, whether one accepts the spiritual sky as being without variety or void, there is none of the spiritual bliss which is enjoyed in the spiritual planets, the Vaikunthas or Krishna Loka. In the absence of varieties of enjoyment, the spirit soul gradually feels an attraction to enjoy a life of bliss. And not having any information of Krishna Loka or Vaikuntha Loka, he naturally falls down to mere material activities in order to enjoy material varieties. Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapakam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Paranti Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagraditan Sarakarana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Savadetam Savajutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahara Ganana Lalita Shri Vishwam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagampate Gopesha Gopeka Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Rangi Radhe Vrinda Vaneshwari Rishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Rubhischa Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right. Welcome everybody. It's so nice to see some newer faces and some loved older faces as well. All right, so in these verses, we're talking about Maharaj Pritha, and he's preparing to leave his body. And he's actually using his previous practice of mystic yoga to leave his body at will. You know, how fantastic is that, to be able to leave your body at will? Many devotees would like to leave their body at will because then they are able to remember Krishna better than if they're being attacked by mucus and bile things at the time of death. It's a lot more difficult to be able to remember Krishna. So as the purport said, some yogis will do this in order to visit higher planets or to merge into the Brahma-yoti or achieve nirvana. So this made me think about, I read about in some Buddhist monks where they actually self-mummify themselves. Has anybody heard of this? Yeah. And so what they'll do is they'll do so many austerities. They'll eat like basically tree bark, grass, and things like that. And they'll sit and meditate until they eventually pass away. And all that's left behind is their body, which generally doesn't become corrupted. And then this is also sometimes seen in Catholic saints too, that they leave their bodies, but their body still stays uncorrupted. I think the last time I looked into it was like 300 Catholic saints actually had are said to have incorrupt bodies after they passed away. But I also did read that the Catholic Church was actually facilitating that process in certain ways by using certain kinds of climatic conditions to keep the bodies in incorrupt states, and also cleansers and things. And so that's just one thing that came to mind when I was thinking about a yogi leaving his body at will. And it said that, I've heard it said that the reason sometimes that those bodies are incorrupt is because they've also left their subtle body behind too. It's not just their gross body. So the purport we just read, they were talking about merging into the Brahma-yoti. And what's the problem with merging into the Brahma-yoti? Does anybody have an idea? I'm sure I know some of you do. Does anybody know? No?
You lose your identity.
What? No.
You lose your identity.
Yeah. Okay. You lose your identity. Sure. Anyone else? Correct?
There's no activities.
There's no activities. Yeah. That's the one thing that I was really thinking of is the soul is active, right? So the soul can't cease to be active. The soul wants to have loving exchanges with other entities. And so it's kind of an artificial imposition to, is this a little loud? It's like ringing. So it's kind of an artificial imposition that we merge into the Brahma-yoti, and then we have no stimulus really. So yes, it's a cessation of the misery that we're currently experiencing, and so that seems pretty attractive actually for most people, I think. But cessation of misery is not bliss, right? And that seems even more attractive, right? I mean, who would rather have bliss than just cessation of misery? I know I would rather have bliss. Yeah. You don't look too impressed, Gauranga, but I think I think you would. Okay. So another problem with merging is that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, which is he says, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. So we're eternally going to be fragmented from him, right? We're not the same. And then in Bhagavad Gita 2:23 and 24, and these are great verses. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by wind. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble. It can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. So he's eternally the same. All those things. So we can't, we can go there, but we're still going to have the same soul. We're going to be eternally the same. That means we're going to desire to have connection with other entities, right? And so, although a cessation of misery sounds really great when you're in the midst of misery, ultimately it can be quite boring, right? So in the purport, it also is said that if you're doing bhakti or Krishna consciousness, that we're already in the Brahmabhuta stage, right? Which is sort of a prerequisite. Realizing you're not this body, that's a prerequisite to be able to leave your body and go back to Godhead. But we're already in that stage if we're doing bhakti or we're Krishna conscious. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about different devotees leaving. Or actually first, let me talk a little bit more from Krishna book. There's this nice bit where they're talking about a little bit about why an impersonal realization is not the highest realization that you can get. So this is from Prayers by the Demigods for Lord Krishna in the Womb. The demigods expressed their mature verdict that persons who are interested in meditating on something void or impersonal cannot cross over the ocean of nescience. Such persons are simply imagining that they have become liberated. O lotus-eyed Lord, their intelligence is contaminated because they fail to meditate upon the lotus feet of your Lordship. As a result of this neglectful activity, the impersonalists fall down again into the material way of conditioned life, although they may temporarily rise to the point of impersonal realization. Impersonalists undergo severe austerities and penances to merge themselves into the Brahman effulgence or impersonal Brahman existence. But their minds are not free from material contamination. They have simply tried to negate the material ways of thinking. That does not mean that they have become liberated. Thus they fall down. Persons who have not taken to devotional service are understood to have come short of the ultimate purpose of knowledge and are not favored by your grace. In spite of conquering material lust and rising to the point of liberation, the impersonalists fall down. If they are engaged just in knowing things for the sake of knowledge and do not take to the devotional service of the Lord, they cannot achieve the desired result. Their achievement is the trouble they take, and that is all. So it doesn't sound like a very good deal, right? So you do all those austerities and then sort of end up, you might have a time of cessation of misery, but ultimately you're going to end up back where you started. And so it's, you take all that trouble for not much, maybe a little bit of peace, a little bit of lack of misery. So, okay, so now I wanted to talk a little bit just about devotees leaving their bodies in general. Some of my favorite stories are from the Bhagavatam, or like different devotees leaving their bodies. Let's see. So the first one that came to mind for me was Sati. So Sati was the wife of Lord Shiva, and her father, Daksha, had insulted Lord Shiva, her husband, and this had made her so angry that she did not want to have any part of her father, which included her body, because she was her father's daughter. And so she decided to leave her body in a very spectacular way in the middle of so many other people, including her father. So this is from the 4th canto. First of all, she sat in the required sitting posture, and then she carried the life air upwards and placed it in the position of equilibrium near the navel. She then raised her life air mixed with intelligence to the heart, and then gradually towards the pulmonary passage, and from there to between her eyebrows. Thus, in order to give up her body, which had been so respectfully and affectionately seated on the lap of Shiva, who is worshipped by great sages and saints, Sati, due to anger towards her father, began to meditate on the fiery air within the body. Sati concentrated all of her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. And this is just a really amazing climax to that whole story. So I encourage you to read, if you haven't read that story of Lord Shiva and Daksha in the 4th canto, I encourage you to read it. It's amazing. But yeah, she was so mad at her father for insulting her husband, who is the best devotee of Krishna. She was so mad she decided to leave her body in a literal blaze of glory, right? So I've always loved that. I don't know. I just always found that fascinating. So my number one favorite story of a devotee leaving their body is Dhruva, right? So this is also from the 4th canto. The 4th canto is great, by the way. I mean, we're still reading it, but all right. So Dhruva, at one point, he was insulted by his stepmother, and he became very furious, and he decided he was going to ask the Lord for a kingdom greater than his father's, greater than his grandfather's and his great-grandfather's, which is pretty amazing because his great-grandfather made the whole universe. So he needs a kingdom greater than the universe. And so when he was asking his mother, you know, what should I do? She told him, look, son, just try to forget about this insult. Just meditate on the Lord. And also his stepmother that insulted him had also told him to meditate on the Lord. And so he decided at 5 years old to go into the forest and to meditate on the Lord so that he could get a kingdom greater than his great-great-grandfather. And so he actually ran into Narada Muni in the forest, who also tried to convince him, like, look, just go home, like, just forget about this insult. But he would not be dissuaded. And so Narada Muni instructed him on the proper ways of meditation and how to meditate on the Lord. And when he did finally, he was meditating one day, and then he's concentrating on the Lord so intently and meditating, and all of a sudden his vision of the Lord disappeared. And so he came out of his meditation, and that's because the Lord was standing there right in front of him, and he was just kind of dumbfounded. He couldn't really say anything. And the Lord had kind of touched him on the head with his conch shell, and suddenly he was able to give out all these beautiful prayers, glorifying the Lord. And he realized the error of his ways, sort of by wanting a kingdom greater than his father's, greater than his great-grandfather's. He said that he had been searching after broken glass when the real gem was standing in front of him, the Lord. And then the Lord kind of told him, well, that's great, but you're going to get this kingdom anyway. And he actually gave him Dhruvaloka, or the pole star, which is actually an eternal planet in the spiritual world. So greater than his father's and his grandfather's and his great-grandfather's. So anyway, after ruling there for, I forget how many years, was it 46,000? 36,000, okay, it was 10,000. 36,000 years. Then he started meditating on the Lord to leave his body. And so this is where we are here. And so it's a long passage. So I actually skipped some stuff in the middle, but you're encouraged to go check it out if you can. All right. In Bhadarak Ashram, Dhruva Maharaj's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear, purified water. He fixed his sitting position by yogic practice, he controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way, his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord. And thus, meditating upon him, he entered into complete trance. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. As soon as the symptoms of his liberation were manifest, he saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky, as if the brilliant full moon coming down, illuminating all the 10 directions. Before getting aboard, Dhruva Maharaj worshipped the airplane, circumnambulated it, and also offered obeisances to the associates of Vishnu. In the meantime, he became as brilliant and illuminating as molten gold. He was thus completely prepared to board the transcendental plane. When Dhruva Maharaj was attempting to get on the transcendental plane, he saw death personified approach him. Not caring for death, however, he took advantage of the opportunity to put his feet on the head of death, and thus he got up on the airplane, which was as big as a house. So this one was a little bit of a trick, because Dhruva didn't actually leave his body. So Dhruva was actually able to go to the spiritual world in the body that he had. The line here from the verse I just read, in the meantime, he became as brilliant and illuminating as molten gold, as his body becoming spiritualized. So he can go back to the spiritual world. And then, of course, my favorite line, not caring for death, however, he took advantage of the opportunity to put his feet on the head of death and thus got up on the airplane, which was as big as a house. I mean, how amazing is that? Death, who was feared by pretty much everybody on the planet, Dhruva's not caring for him and uses him as a step to get on the airplane. And this is what's so amazing about when you realize your actual position as a servant of Krishna, right? Then we cannot care for death. And we can use death as a stepping stone to get to the spiritual world. Because the death of a devotee is a glorious thing, right? It's a glorious thing. That devotee is going to be back with Krishna, or is that much closer to being back with Krishna? Or he's going to serve Krishna in some way. And so this is glorious. There's billions and billions of dollars that are spent probably every year on prolonging the life and preventing death. And what is that quality of life that people are having? It's not, the people are living longer, and to some extent, their quality of life is better than in previous generations. But what is the ultimate goal? I mean, really, they end up losing everything in the end anyway. So, and all that money and effort is spent on prolonging the life. Sometimes when it's really questionable, why should this person be prolonging their life? They're just suffering. But that's because of this fear of death, right? But we can, by understanding our true constitutional position as servants of Krishna, and by understanding that he's in control, we're not in control, and by understanding that we're not our bodies and that we're eternal souls, then death is not so scary anymore, right? And then we can also, as it said about Dhruva, not care for death and step on his head. I just love that. That's probably my favorite story of a devotee leaving his body, and he's not even leaving his body, he's taking it with him. So I also wanted to talk about Vishnudev, right? So Bhishma Dev, he was the grandfather of both the Pandavas and the Kurus, and he fought on the side of the Kurus. Arjuna and Krishna were on the other side. And at one point during the battle, Arjuna had shot him full of arrows. And grandfather Bhishma, he had a boon that he would only die when he wanted. So he was able to still be alive while laying on a bed of arrows. That's what it says. He's laying on a bed of arrows. I actually have a picture in here. I know a lot of you have seen it, but some of you are new. If you want to see, you can just pass it around. And then also, there's I'll talk about the one with the pink marker later. But anyway, there you can see in that picture, grandfather Bhishma with a bed of arrows, right? It looks pretty painful. And so he stayed that way for 2 months, with all those arrows in him. And he was talking about philosophy with various sages. And at some point, because Krishna wanted to please him, he brought the Pandavas to come and see him. And the Pandavas had just won the war. And so grandfather Bhishma, he was so happy to see his grandsons had won the war, and even though he was fighting on the other side. And it was then when the moment was most auspicious, he then fixed his mind on Krishna and prepared to leave his body. So what he ended up fixing his mind on, partially because Krishna was right in front of him, but also he was thinking about during the battle at one point, Krishna was going after Arjuna and was about to kill him. And Krishna, he had made a vow to not fight in the war, to not take sides. But he's seeing his friend, his dear friend and devotee Arjuna in danger, about to be killed. He became enraged and he picked up a broken chariot wheel and went after grandfather Bhishma with this wheel. And so this is what grandfather Bhishma was remembering as he was preparing to leave his body. And so here's what the Bhagavatam says. This is from the first canto. Thereupon that man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men stopped speaking, and being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him, four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. By pure meditation, looking at Lord Sri Krishna, he at once was freed from all material inauspiciousness and was relieved of all bodily pains caused by the arrow wounds. Thus all the external activities of his senses at once stopped, and he prayed transcendentally to the controller of all living beings while quitting his material body. So there's actually many beautiful prayers that he says after this, but they're just too long to read. So what is the point? What is the point of all this, right? Or also, one more story, which is this one about Shishupal. I really like this story about Shishupal. So Shishupal, he did not like Krishna. He did not like Krishna at all, because Krishna had he was set to be married to a young lady, and Krishna came and kidnapped her and married her instead because she wanted to. As we see so many times in romantic situations, there was some anger to be had from the person that did not get the girl. So Shishupal did not like it. And at one point there was this big sacrifice, and they were going to honor one person, and they decided to honor Krishna, that he was the greatest one. They were going to honor him. And this really got on Shishupal's nerves. He was pretty upset about this. And so he started just kind of saying all kinds of mean insults about Krishna. And Krishna had made promise, I think to Shishupal's mother, was it Shishupal's mother he made the promise to? That he would go ahead and let him insult him 100 times, and he would overlook that. And so Shishupal's just letting those insults fly, just letting them out there. And he insulted him the 100th time, and he got a little bit of warning, and then he didn't heed it. And he insulted him the 101st time, and Krishna called his Sudarsana chakra and just sent it out and cut his head off. And then Shishupal, his life force, actually, everybody saw it leave his body and kind of merge into Krishna's body. And so I really like that story. And that's actually this painting too. So I know y'all just passed it around, but if you're interested, you can check it out. It's one of my favorites. Okay, so what is the point of all this? Why are we talking about all these devotees leaving their bodies? Besides the fact that, we covered, okay, it's very glorious, it's very wonderful when a devotee leaves their body. Even Shishupal, who hated Krishna, right? He didn't like Krishna, but he was still liberated by Krishna because he was focused on Krishna at the end. Now he got impersonal liberation, not a personal liberation, but he was still liberated. So what is the point of all this? So we don't need to practice Kundalini yoga. We don't need to raise our life air. We don't need to do all those austerities in order to get this result that all these devotees had. All we need to do is remember Krishna at the time of death. So in the Bhagavad Gita 14:26, it says, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So that's why we have to have a good sadhana practice, do devotional service. And the reason we have good sadhana, like I mentioned earlier, it's hard. It's hard at death, when death comes, to remember really anything because you're suffering, you're choking, you can't breathe, you have mucus, it's difficult, it's painful. So that's why we practice. We do the practice every day. We think about Krishna every day. We're practicing doing this so that when that moment comes, we're ready, right? And so Bhagavad Gita 8, 5, and 6, which is actually the verses we're reading this week. Every day after Mangalarti, we read 2 verses, except for today, we read the 10 offenses. And those say, whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me, alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So that's why we need to remember Krishna. And that's why we need to keep this practice as steady as we can. Remember Krishna in everything that we do. I've mentioned this before in classes, but just the process that Srila Prabhupada has given us is so great because just doing normal things that we need to sustain our own lives can now be used to remember Krishna. We offer the food to the bhoga to Krishna, and then we eat it as prasadam. So, everybody has to eat, right? So then we're remembering Krishna every single time we eat. During the process of deity worship is so great because now every time I see a flower, I think, oh, that would be nice for my deities. I never really thought about flowers before. Maybe occasionally I'd be like, wow, that's a really beautiful flower. But now every single time I see a flower, I think, oh, I should grab that for my deities. And so in this way, we're able to practice thinking about Krishna every day just for that big test, that moment at the end when we die, can we think of Krishna? And if we do a devotional service and we honestly practice our sadhana, if we are in a position where we actually are not able to remember Krishna, say we're in a coma or something, Krishna will come and get us. Srila Prabhupada will come and get us. So it's win-win, right? All right, so I think I'll end there. And so if there's any questions or comments, or if anyone has a story about a devotee leaving their body, whether the devotee they know or someone from the Bhagavatam, that's their favorite story or what you find interesting, just share it. Yes, Uncle S. Prabhu.
In Australia, Borijan Prabhu tells a nice story about, I forget the parrot's name. There was a parrot in the temple.
A parrot?
Parrot.
Okay.
Because he liked to imitate the devotees chanting Hare Krishna. So he would sing in kirtan, he would chant in kirtan, he would chant in japa, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You know, he was chanting. You're talking about practice, okay?
Yeah.
But there's a twist to this. So, but then something happened in the temple, and there was a lot of danger. You know, as soon as there was danger, the parrot didn't chant Hare Krishna. He went, ah! So the purport of Borijan's story is that when we practice, we've got to be thinking of Krishna and not be like the parrot. Otherwise, I mean, I can go through the morning program and I'm not hear a word of what I'm singing or chanting because I'm thinking of something else.
Right.
So, Hare Krishna.
All right. That's a great point. Yeah, we don't want to be parrots. But do you think that parrot at least gets some benefit? You know?
I think somebody even asked that in class. And Borijan didn't know what to say. But there's another kind of parrot that's good, shuka. Shuka means parrot. And that devotee parrot, when he touches the Shastra, he makes it even sweeter by his realizations. He expands the mercy of the Shastra.
Right, Jai. Is there any other questions or comments? No? Yeah, Chaitanya Shwagarangadas.
I'm very inspired reading stories of devotees leaving their bodies, but more than in the Bhagavatam about ISKCON devotees. Recently, so many great stories, but recently, in the last year and a half or so, I'm still writing the high of Kadambakanda Maharaj's departure was so
Absolutely.
amazing and inspiring that I think about him every day. He's such an inspiring devotee. So, you can hear there's so many nice videos and lectures. Jadibeta Maharaj was there. Bibi Govinda Swami was there. And his servants were there, speaking about how the occurrence happened. But needless to say, it was very obvious. But he was Bibi Govinda Maharaj was leading kirtan, and that's enough to send you back to Godhead. But then Maharaj was very, very ill, and the whole process, he was never forgetting Krishna. But at the very, very end, Jadvaita Swami, who was very grave, not a very lighthearted person, he was very grave and serious. And so he was very ecstatic, and he was saying, Maharaj had looked like right before he was about to leave his body, he looked like a man who had every single desire he ever had fulfilled. So that was very inspiring.
Wow. Very nice. Right. Is there any more comments, questions, stories about a devotee leaving their body, anything like that? No? Okay, just end there. Ram ki jai.